Welcome back, everyone. Sorry, online guests, we spent too much time in the sun, but we're back. Got a beautiful sunny day today. And in the winter sun, you can bear much more than in that strong summer sun, but of course your body will tell you that. But now we're up to the third law, and the third law is temperance. It's an old-fashioned word. It means not taking anything into the body that will harm it, and taking in moderation the good things. So all good things should be done in moderation. Even that beautiful breakfast that we served to you this morning, if that's overdone, that can turn to poison. All good things should be done in moderation. And you probably discovered, guests, that you couldn't eat as much. Did you find that? Because you've had 2 days on juices. And it is far better that you undereat a little rather than overeat. And it's like at lunchtime. The meal we serve you at lunchtime will be a little more substantial. And so you can have a little, you'll be better prepared for more food at lunch because you've already had your initial break fast. But even then, you really don't need to eat a lot. A lot of guests think, I've got to eat a lot because I'm not going to eat anything till breakfast the next day. But you'll be surprised that you really don't. In fact, if you eat too much, it's going to be hard to go to sleep tonight because the stomach will be so uncomfortable. All good things should be done in moderation. All work and no play makes Jack a very dull boy. We even had a guest that had set up his whole room like an office. He said, I've got to work, I've got this. I said, your children will grow up not even knowing who you are. And I can testify, they grow up very quickly. And so spend time with them. Time's so important. You've got to have your priority list in your day. In fact, if you haven't got time to spend with your children, you've got to do an assessment of your time. What are you doing with your time? And what's important in your life? All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, isn't that true? But all work and no play does that. But on the other side, all play and no work makes Jack a poor boy. And we've got so many children growing up today, all they do is play. That's all they do. And when my friend started an orphanage in Africa, she said the children just wanted to work. She'd tell them to go and play, but they didn't want to play. They wanted to work. Work was their play. And some people say, oh, the poor children. Well, I say, oh, the poor Westerners that don't even know how to work. You know why these children loved work? Because when you work, you experience the joy of accomplishment. And in the break from school, there'd be a big tub of potatoes and they'd run out of school scrubbing the potatoes ready for lunch, and they would be laughing and the bell would go, oh, just one more potato. And then they'd run back into school laughing. They had the joy of accomplishment. So surely this is a balance. Now, we are not suggesting we go back to the days where small children had to work in the mines all day, every day. No, we've got, of course that's not right. But we need a balance. And when you teach your children to work, it makes your load lighter and they experience the joy of accomplishment and they grow up as human beings that know how to work and they're invaluable. No, there should be a balance of all this. But there are some things that should never be taken into the body if you're looking for optimum performance. And I consider the pure crystallized acid one of the most dangerous substances ever given to human beings. So when someone says to me about a herb, would that hurt a children? I say not near as much as that sugar candy that you're giving them. I'm just surprised when people say, oh, but is this herb safe for the baby? I said, far safer than the vaccines that have been given, far safer than some of the things that are giving. We've actually forgotten what's safe. And if a baby died from a herb, that would make headlines. Am I right? Absolutely. No, the sugar is incredibly dangerous. Dr. Yatkin, in his book, he claimed it should be banned. It is so dangerous. It gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast. And because of that, a lot of insulin is released to get the blood sugar level down again. But now it goes too low. But what does the person do down there? Have more sugar to get it up again. And what the pancreas can't handle is this up, down, and so pancreases start to wear out. There's a big contributing factor to diabetes. 2 organs are dramatically affected by sugar. One is the pancreas and the other is the brain, because the brain can only hold a 2-minute supply of fuel. So when it drops down here, it only takes 2 minutes and the brain's not working well. People used to say to me, how can you stand having your children around you all day long? Because I homeschooled. I said, it's real easy when you don't give them sugar. You haven't got these highs, lows, high, lows. And I tell you what, it's a much happier mother, which creates a much happier home when the mother's not on the highs, lows, lows. But something else has come in that's a huge contributing factor to diabetes, and that's the hybridized wheat. The wheat was hybridized in the 50s. The reason it was hybridized was to produce a plant with a high yield of grain. Have you noticed that the wheat only grows that high? When I was a child, it used to grow this high. If it still grew that high, the stalk would break before you could harvest that grain. Because through the hybridization of the grain, it produced a plant that can yield sometimes 6 times the grain that it originally did. So it went worldwide in the 70s. Dr. Norman Bourlag got a Nobel Prize, 1976, for his hybridized grain. And the farmers love it. They're getting 6 to 10 times more grain per acre. They've got to pay their bills. So by the 1990s, every bread, every cake, every donut, every pretzel, every pasta, every cereal, it's all a hybridized grain. And notice those figures, 1970s, went worldwide, 1990s, it's in full production. Isn't that when we saw the explosion in diabetes? And the reason is that this was rushed through with no safety studies. Sounds like something else, doesn't it? I'm not interested in something that has not had the safety studies. No safety studies were done. They didn't think they have to do safety studies on wheat, but we are only now starting to see the problems that it is causing. And what I want to particularly look at is one aspect, and that's the starch. The starch that was created in the hybridization process is called amylopectin. Amylopectin A is the starch that was created. And amylopectin A is a starch that gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast. Then you've got that corresponding drop. This is amylopectin A. Amylopectin B is the starch found in bananas and potatoes. And if you're familiar with the glycemic index of foods, you will know that bananas and potatoes get the blood sugar level up reasonably high, reasonably fast. So we're looking at it's not as high, not as fast. There's your amylopectin B. Amylopectin C is found in legumes. So this is chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans. That gives a lovely steady rise, a lovely steady maintenance, a lovely steady drop. What does every cell in our body want? A steady, sure delivery of fuel, not the quick highs and the quick lows. So let me show you how this sits on the glycemic index. So the glycemic index of food is an index of how quickly the glucose in the food is released into the blood. So the baseline is 55. Cherries, all your berries sit at 26. So blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, all your berries are what's considered low GI. Dr. Atkins, they were the only fruit that were allowed on his diet because they have a low GI. So all your berries are a great fruit for diabetics. Grapefruit. And I'm sure we all realise grapefruit sits fairly low. It sits at about 25. So they're great fruits for diabetics. Sugar. Where does sugar sit? Sugar sits at 59, and that's not surprising whether it's white or tan or brown. White flour. White flour, that's white bread, white pasta. It sits at 69. So foods made out of wheat flour, the refined wheat flour, it gets the blood sugar level up higher even than sugar. And how many products you'll see in cake shops are the combination of those two? Wholemeal or whole wheat. So whole wheat, it sits at 72. How could this be? How could the whole wheat get the blood sugar level up higher than even the white? Doesn't it have fibre that slows down the release? It does. But because it's not refined, it contains more amylopectin A. And it's amylopectin A that gets the starch up. My husband said, "Barbara, what are you saying?" He said, "I've got a phone call with this lady that says, Barbara says white bread's better than brown bread." I said, I'm talking about the amylopectin A. Now, whole wheat is far superior than white because it has fibre, because it has the B vitamins. But regarding a diabetic and regarding blood sugar levels and regarding the release of this glucose, they're actually better to totally stop all wheat and refined sugar. And as I'll show you tomorrow, when we look at the gluten and what they did, what the hybridization of the wheat did to the gluten structure, you will see that you can still get, they're called ancient grains today that have not been hybridized. That's spelt, Enkenhorn, Kamut. But this explains why the hybridized wheat sits up here. One lady said to me, "I'm a diabetic. I'm told to eat whole wheat. They told me to eat whole wheat bread, whole wheat cereal, whole wheat pasta." And I do, but she said every 6 months I get put on more insulin. She said, "You've just solved the puzzle." The wheat was hybridized, that's the problem. 500 new diabetics are being diagnosed every week in Australia. That's scary. And when we looked at our carbohydrate list, how many were from wheat? When God said, "Behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth," he didn't say, "Behold, I've given you wheat." He's given us a variety of grains. So what also should be on this list if you're looking for optimum performance? Caffeine. And caffeine has a very disruptive effect on the neurotransmitters in the brain. In fact, it creates a crisis. There's a book in the library called Caffeine Blues, I think by Kaczynski is his name. And he shows that when we have a cup of coffee, it basically creates a little bit of a crisis in the body. And this crisis response in our body is important in a crisis. It gets us moving, gets us running or climbing or jumping or whatever the crisis demands. But I'd like to go inside the cell and I want to show you the effect of this crisis. So here is the nerve cell. And the nerve cells don't touch each other, they communicate with each other via little chemical messengers. So the messages come in, they're encapsulated in the arm, they're encapsulated in the nucleus and they're sent down the arm. And then when they get into the boutons, they release out to the next nerve cell. That's how the communication system in our nervous system works. What caffeine does is it disrupts these neurotransmitters. One is adenosine, And adenosine is the neurotransmitter that acts like it brakes. And we've been looking this week at the importance of precision balance in so many areas in our body. And what the caffeine does is it causes adenosine levels to drop. So very quickly the brain develops extra receptor sites to grab every bit of adenosine that comes through. Then the person comes to Living Springs Retreat, no caffeine, adenosine levels go back to normal, receptor sites get flooded, and that hurts. That's the caffeine headache that we see so often. That's why you'll find that no one here drinks coffee, because we watch and we think, well, I don't want that. Look at the effect that it has. The other is acetylcholine, and acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that has to do with brain function, and it rises in a crisis. It rises when a person has a cup of coffee. And isn't that why most people have a cup of coffee? I just got to get my brain going. Yes, it does, but then the body says, wow, we've got too much acetylcholine, stop making so much. So there might be an initial rise, but then there's a corresponding dump. And dopamine is the last one. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's responsible for the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of reward, pursuit of escape hormone. It rises in a crisis. It rises when you have a cup of coffee. So that's why people say to me, oh, I just love my coffee. Gets my brain going, makes me feel good. Ah, yes, that's the acetylcholine and that's the dopamine. But eventually, what's happening to dopamine? Exhausted. The person hasn't got any get up and go anymore. And how many people complain in their 50s, even in their 40s now, of no energy? Just got no get up and go. And what do they do to get themselves up and going? Have another cup of coffee. It's just such a vicious cycle. Another on the no list is alcohol. There's no safe dose of alcohol. This is a statement from the Australian Health Department about 10 years ago. And the reason why there's no safe dose of alcohol is because it's a neurotoxin. A neurotoxin means brain poison. Once that brain cell's gone, it's gone. Doesn't regrow. On Saturday morning, when we go to the brain, I'm going to show you that there is a way that you can stimulate neurogenesis. But once that brain cell's dead, it's gone. Alcohol is a neurotoxin, as is mercury. And there's no safe dose of mercury, as there is no safe dose of alcohol. And so, how do we get exposed to mercury? We can get exposed to mercury in the flu vaccine. We can get exposed to mercury in fish. There's hardly a fish today that's mercury free. One of the reasons is because of the industry that's just pumping into many waterways. Very sad story from Minamata Bay in Japan. They found that these cats were doing backflips, and when they did postmortems on the cats, they found that they had mercury. And then they discovered that the fishermen, the families were having babies born with neurological problems. Do you know what's really sad is the company, the factory that was pumping the waste into the bay, nothing was done about it for some time, I think about 15 years. You know what they called it? They didn't call it mercury disease, they called it dancing cat disease. And same with the Mad Hatter's disease. You see, the hatters used to glue the mercury, or the hats together, felt hats together with mercury. And so they'd go mad. You know, in Alice in Wonderland, there's the Mad Hatter, because there was a Mad Hatter's disease. They didn't call it mercury disease, they called it Mad Hatter's disease. So where we can be exposed, again, is the fish. If you love fish, make it a rare treat and go for the smallest fish. One of the big problems with mercury is it's bioaccumulative. That means it accumulates. So the bigger the fish, the higher the concentration of mercury. I gave you the story of my friend David Harris yesterday. Remember he had those bypasses, and we discovered it was because he was eating so much tuna. Tuna was damaging the arteries. So it's in the flu vaccine, it's in most fish. The only ones that might escape are the ones that are in pristine waters and very small ones. But also, mercury is in the silver fillings in the teeth. Did you know the history shows that for over 100 years, mercury was banned in Europe, and it was also banned in America. They had the same rulings. And then a French doctor came over and started his own dental association and started using mercury. Why do they like mercury? Well, it's antibacterial, and it's the only liquid metal, and it's about 50% mercury. I think they put it with copper, and it sort of molds in your teeth. They like it because it stays forever. What a worry. You can Google Google the smoking tooth, and it's just a tiny little clip where they've got this screen that can measure mercury vapor, and they have a tooth with mercury in it, and they rub it and you can see the mercury vapor coming off. Pour hot water in, like if someone has a hot drink, you see more mercury vapor coming off. So that's where you can be exposed to mercury. If you have mercury fillings in your mouth, the silver fillings, please find a biological dentist who knows the danger and will extract those mercury in as safe as possible way and be able to replace them with the white fillings. Mercury is a neurotoxin, as is alcohol. Drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location of disease. In a crisis, a drug can save a life. I am so glad for the drug that numbed my arm when the doctor pulled my bones into place. In a crisis, absolutely. When my sister was knocked over by a car and was unconscious when they found her, she had a broken femur, broken hips. I'm so glad for the paramedics that saved her life. I'm so glad for the drugs that they used. But she's not on them now. And she wasn't even on them 2 weeks later. So in a crisis, absolutely a drug. But we're not talking about crises here. We're talking about day-to-day things. Some drugs can be stopped immediately. Some drugs have to be eased off, and that's where you can get advice on that. But remember that drugs never cure. The body and the body alone has the power to heal. Also, meat. Now, I get a little bit of criticism about meat. One lady in Ireland, she said, but we grow our own. We live on a mountaintop. And I said, well, that meat would certainly be healthier than the meat that's in the supermarket today. Roadkill should never be given to cows, you know, and I'm sure we're all aware of the dangers of the mad cow disease, etc., etc. 80% of the antibiotics that are made are given to animals. So just, if you do like meat and want to eat it, it must be organic and really a rare treat. Tomorrow when we look at the acid alkaline, we will see what a high acid food that the meat is. Also adding to our list is electromagnetic field excess. We are electrical people, and the electricity that's coming out of the devices is not the same as our electromagnetic field. Be careful on your exposure. I'm very thankful for WhatsApp and emails that allows me to travel the world and still have day-to-day contact with my family, but I always charge my devices out of my bedroom while I'm sleeping. I also answer the emails as much as is possible in the daylight, because that night, and we'll see that in our next lecture when we look at sleep, it's a big interference with the way our brain works, especially the light and dark signals. Also, protect your children. Protect your children against the excess of the electromagnetic field. They are even more susceptible than the adults. So We do have a bit of exposure, but please reduce it as much as possible. It's called the silent killer because it's something that you cannot see. Get the chemicals out of your homes, out of your clothes, out of your food, out of your personal care products, out of your cleaning products. One lady said, it's going to cost me a fortune. I said, no, you can just get sodium bicarbonate. Just use sodium bicarbonate, white vinegar. You can easily do it with those. Mold. Be careful on mold exposure. We've already looked at the danger of mold. Make sure it's not in the house. If it is, please find out why it's there, because there's a reason why it's there. Is it there because of a leaking tap? Is it there because you haven't got enough ventilation? There's always a reason. Tobacco, one of the biggest inhibitors of oxygen uptake at the cellular level is tobacco. I think that's a well-acknowledged danger today. It's a very socially acceptable list, isn't it? There's no need for me to talk to you about the dangers of cyanide, arsenic, methamphetamines, but there's definitely a need to become aware of the dangers of this very socially acceptable list. Little by little, like the dripping tap on a stone, these poisons are coming in and having an effect. It's not the one time it's done, it's just again and again and again. I didn't write down vaping. I think we're all aware that vaping and cigarettes, there's really no difference. It's just as dangerous, perhaps even more dangerous because of the chemicals that are in it.